All right, we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to our Chai with Coaches live stream for our. It's already end of February, Nahid. That's a little bit crazy. Like me,
And
I don't know.
we pretended that 2020 didn't even exist.
I didn't, but sure, yes. It's hard to pretend that didn't exist, but yeah, no, this year seems like it's flying by, and good and bad, I think. But I think it's just in general, it's neither good nor bad. It just is flying
It
by.
just is.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I wanted to we talked about this briefly. We wanted to kind of piggyback off what we left off last time, which is the authenticity and kind of like the fixed versus growth mindset of some folks, and how do you identify yourself? And you had a specific example you want to kind of bring up for yourself. So do you want to share that with folks?
Yeah, and I think that a few people might be able to resonate with this. So let's take me, for example. I'm somebody who likes to be adventurous. I'm not crazy adventurous, but I'm a little bit more adventurous, for example, than my husband. My husband's very fixed in how he chooses, for example, restaurants and what he's willing to try and even experience. And something that I tease him about all the time. It took me 2 years for me to be able to nag being the operative word here, to be able to nag him into getting to a particular restaurant that now, I don't know, 4 years later, it still continues to be his number one. Okay, he loves it. And when I tell him, like, look, this is evidence why we should do more of this kind of stuff, he's like, yeah, but my life would not have been any different had I not known about this restaurant. I'm not about trying different things. That's not who I am. So why do you keep forcing me to do it? Good point, right?
Yeah, and that comes to the authenticity question, right? It's like if he's living authentically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then he probably wouldn't experience a lot of things he would experience with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then on your side of things, if you're living authentically, then you're going to keep pushing him to do new things, right? And is it possible, and how is it possible for the two of you to live authentically together, right? It's a really interesting thing because you take authenticity and you just in a vacuum with one person, right? And it's like, okay, I want to live authentically for me, right? I can, maybe I don't know exactly what that looks like right now, but if I think about it and plan it out, and I'm intentional about it, I can probably figure out what that looks like and what things I want to do, what experiences I want to have, what kinds of how I want to spend my time.
Mm-hmm.
Then you throw another person in there, right? You throw a partner or a friend or whatever in there, and I think that's where you kind of get to the point where it's like, okay, well, what is authenticity for the two of us together as a unit, right? And it's not necessarily one person imposing their will on the other person, obviously, right? Because then that person's not living authentically. But at the same time, what's the line between authenticity and growth, right? Where's the point where you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to push myself to my comfort zone to grow. At the same time, I'm not pushing myself to be not me, right? Like, how do I define myself? What's your identity like?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting debate that people tend to have, and I feel like the why is what makes a distinction here. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you willing to make this step outside your comfort zone, right? Are you doing it for you? Are you doing it for someone else? Are you doing it purely for them, or do you have any interest at all, right? And that's what I think kind of an interesting debate.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, in the first blush of a relationship, I go out and eat the kinds of foods that I would never eat. To me, those are bland foods, right? Greasy spoon type of places. That's just not my thing. And my husband was willing to try different things. So, for the first time, he tried Thai food. For the first time, he tried Indian food. And there, it just never is his flavor, right? So in
Mm-hmm.
the beginning, we were willing to make that balance. You did a little bit and I did a little bit. But now, several years in, he's very clear that these are kinds of things he doesn't want to do. So the few times when he does it, I should give it, let me rephrase that. I need to give him more credit. Okay. He's done it a lot more than he would have ever considered. He's doing it more for me than he does for himself. And, while that's gratifying at some level, it really doesn't he doesn't enjoy it, right? And that's not that enjoyable for me either. I don't want to be the only one guiltily enjoying every bite of my food. And so
Yeah.
like we're talking about traveling, and I said, well, what are you going to eat when we travel? I mean, when we
Right.
went to India, he basically sustained himself on rice and naan, plain rice and naan. and he lost weight on carbs. That's how little he ate. He lost weight on carbs.
I mean, it's safe, right? I mean, it's at least he knows it's relatively safe. But at the
I
same
don't
time,
think
like,
that was the reason why he did it.
no, I don't think so either, based on what you're saying.
But yes,
no,
it's safe.
but yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like, it's like, you know, when you're planning stuff like that, like when you're looking into having those kind of experiences and you want to go do those things, you know, if he says that that's his favorite restaurant now. Sorry, quick thing. Hi, Tasha and Rick. Thanks for joining
Hi,
in.
nice to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining in again, as usual. But no, when you do those things together, when you plan those things together, right? What does it look like? I mean, like, it sounds like you're kind of pushing. Like, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do that. And he's like, I guess I'll do it if you want, right? But like you said, though, that doesn't give you enjoyment to have that experience, for him not to be excited about it, right? And on his side, it's like he doesn't know enough about it to be excited, right? And if he experiences it and really enjoys it, I'm curious more about that a little bit more. But
He says he is content where he is. And that's the key over here. If he never experienced this dish, and by the way, it's not a restaurant, it's one dish in one restaurant. That's it. One dish, okay? And he says that if he never experienced that dish ever again, his life would be just as content. And therein lies the real butting head moments. And let me say, I mean, not that we're rushing out for counseling, but to me, this is where, as coaches, where we come in, where each person has their own point of view and they're so entrenched in their own point of view that it's hard to see the other side of it. But this is where the professionals come in to help you untangle these emotions out, right? So when he's content with status quo, which is how he's lived, and I'm only content with, you know, this level of adventure, activity, what have you, you know, then comes the question of how do we have a meeting of the minds, like you were saying, on an ongoing basis, like, you know, not just, you know, like I said, the first blush of a relationship.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because to me, if like, so he said this is his favorite dish, right?
Black pepper beef.
Okay, black pepper beef, for example. Right there you go. That's his favorite restaurant, his favorite dish now. For me, my favorite dish, if it's my favorite dish, I would not be content never having it again, right? Because I think that would be, I mean, I'd be content having tried it, but I would want it again at some point in my life, right?
So the point is not to never have it, is he was content with never experiencing it.
Oh, in the first place, like before.
Exactly. He said his life has not changed while he's added one more dish he enjoys. His life would not have changed had he never experienced it in the first place.
See, that's something I would also delve deeper into, and this reminds me that the whole idea, like, and this came up earlier today with a client as well. It's where they're talking about someone else, and it's like you can only coach the person in the room, right? So you can only really delve into that person that you're talking to. And so for you, Nahida, what I would ask you is, what's the impact on you, and how do you feel about that when he says that, for example?
So I'll tell you, one of the conclusions that I have come to is that I cannot place my happiness on somebody else's decisions.
Correct.
Sometimes what that means is I go off and do my own thing. My friend, a really good friend of mine, and she knows that my husband is not an adventurous eater. So when we go out to eat, we make sure we go to restaurants that he would never go to. That's our criteria, to be 100% honest, because that's my opportunity to do so. When I want to go out and do other things, I sometimes just have to do it on my own. I have to understand that just because I would like him to be there does not necessarily mean that I should stop myself because he's not there, or that I should force himself to be there. So that's number one I had to figure out. And then the second thing I had to figure out was I'm not responsible for his happiness or unhappiness. In other words, if he does something and he doesn't like it, then, you know, instead of crying that, oh my gosh, why did I take him to this place? I should have known. I have to just say, you know what? That was his choice. He agreed to come. I did not force him at this point, right? In the past, I did. And then he gets to decide how he's going to experience this, because it's more than just the food, right? It's the camaraderie and it's the ambiance, us spending time together, those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's something that's important you said that I want to really call out, which is you can't have your happiness, or even his happiness, frankly, depend on anything external. whether
Yeah.
it's him or anything external. Frankly, it's just got to be, you got to depend on you for your happiness, because you're the only thing you can control in any situation, right? That's the only variable you can control is yourself. You can't control anything else that happens around or in the inner vicinity, or to you or whatever, right? It's really something where it's you have to be able to control yourself and take control, right, of those kind of things, and let go of that responsibility. Like you said, you can't feel guilty if he doesn't like something that he's trying, right? He's still making a choice to try it. As long as you don't like actively force him and guilt him into it, that's kind of messed up. But
Oh, trust me, I did that one too. I went through the entire circle. It's
gotcha.
a growing thing, and
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just
it's growth.
yeah, and I'm thinking about what Natasha has written, which is you do have to pick your battles, and Natasha loves to cook, and it's a good thing that Rick loves her food because my husband and I cook separately. I mean, literally in my kitchen, I have my spice cabinet, and and he has his spice cabinet. It is that different because our tastes are that different. But somehow or the other, it's interesting because we do kind of make it work. I will say that let's say 80% of the compromise actually comes from my husband. So, I want to make that clear too. But this is something this is, his tastes are very set and he's very content to keep it set. And so, I have to kind of like maneuver around it most of the time. And like you say, finally come to the realization that I can cook my own food. I don't need him to cook for me. Sometimes when we order out, we order from two different places. I know that sounds crazy, but we do. So coming to those kinds of things where I'm not expecting him to bend to me to say, okay, now I'm happy.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting perspective, because it is something that people tend to do, right? We tend to think we have to compromise at every level for the people that matter to us in our lives, right? We try to say we have to like everything, right, together. We can't have
Yes.
anything separate. We have to compromise on everything. Everything has to be done together, no matter what, right? Even if you hate doing something, we have to make it work. And if I hate something, we have to make it work, because that's what compromise is. And that's just not the case, like our differences make us individuals, right? And then that makes things more interesting. And some people are not willing to have those same experiences that we're all willing to have, all of us, so, and that's on the flip side, there may be things he wants to do that you don't necessarily want to do as well.
Yes,
right?
football watching or any kind of TV watching. Let me just add that.
Well, yeah, we know you're not a fan of TV. We know that that's abundantly clear.
And guess what my husband does not when he's working hours. He works really long hours, but when he's not working, guess what he does from morning to night?
What?
Watch TV.
Nice.
We are opposites in many, many ways.
Well, they say opposites attract, right? I mean, I think the important thing is just where it's like, you can complement each other, right, where it matters, and it's really like enriching each other's experiences, right? Adding that extra dimension to things, to that experience with the other person. And it's like, that I think that's where real strong connections come from, is where you can appreciate and elevate experiences because you're together. But then you also have your separate lives, because at the end of the day, like everything, you're not attached at the hip, right? It's actually not healthy to be couple wise, to be with someone every single second of every single day all the time. That's called codependence. It's not a good thing, like it's unhealthy. But to your earlier thing, like if folks do have these things where they talk and get into these conversations and they end up becoming conflicts of some sort, no matter how little or large, it's something where you can be realigned sometimes, and it might help to bring in a professional like a therapist or a counselor or a coach or whatever. But it's not like you're seeing someone like that in those kind of professionals takes away from your experience. It doesn't mean it's not a bad thing. I think there's a stigma associated with that. It's getting less and less over the years as we mature as a society, and I use that word very loosely after the last year. But as we mature around things like mental health and stigma around that, I think that the stigma is going away slowly, but it's still there, especially for certain communities like this South Asian community. The idea of mental
I think
health.
lots of communities fall into that category.
Yeah, it's frustrating because there's really a lot of, I mean, like I'll be upfront. Like when I went to law school, I had a huge problem adjusting to that, right? Because my life is I'm like you in the sense of I love adventure, I like all kinds of different experiences, right? And doing different things and having different kinds of interests that I pursue, right? Like there was no 2 days that were the same in college for me. Like, I went to class most of the time. And when I didn't go to class, I was doing stuff with my friends, or I was like experiencing different things, or like playing different sports. And, and then I go to law school and I have to focus on just law school. That takes up all my time. And that was a huge adjustment for me. And I went through a really tough time. And thankfully, the University Counseling Center had that available available offer for students to get counseling for free. And I took advantage of it. I lucked out because I didn't realize how much I had lucked out, because I got an amazing counselor and she was phenomenal. I had her for the rest of my entire law school career until I graduated. Fast forward a couple of years when I was dealing with a lot of stuff in my divorce, right? And you have this difficulty in finding real quality therapists or real quality counselors. There are a lot of shitty ones out there, just like coaches, right? There are a lot of shitty coaches out there, right? And there's a lot of shitty car salesmen, shitty attorneys, and they give people a bad name, right? They give these professions a really bad name. And it's a matter of sorting through them to get to good ones. And going back to the stigma thing, it really helped though. I wasn't depressed in law school, but it helped me to adjust, right? It helps with those kind of sorting through your thoughts and what your feelings are and exactly understanding who you are underneath a lot of the stuff. And that helped a lot with my self-awareness.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wish when I was in a place of depression, I didn't even recognize that's what it was until somebody pointed it out. I wish I had thought about reaching out. At that point, I hit for me, it was rock bottom, and I had to just quit everything, quit my job, quit my life, quit everything. And now I'm, in that place where I constantly work on myself, because as a coach, you cannot have all these filters from your own prior experiences when you sit in front of somebody else, because then you're looking at them with those filters on. You cannot do that. And, I appreciate some of the things that Natasha has been putting out there. And yeah, it's kind of hard to be able to say, yeah, I'm the independent one and I'm the codependent one, right? Because all of these things actually have is using that word stigma. There's a little bit of judgment attached to it. Yep. And that's where professionals are really good at helping you separate the emotion, the beliefs, and the actions, and then try to get to the underneath part of it. Like, what the heck is really going on? What's really causing all of this?
Yeah, 100%. And what you just described is exactly what, like, the foundation of coaching at its core, it really is, right? It's belief, action, result, right? Right now you have these certain beliefs that cause you to act a certain way, right? Or that make you think that acting a certain way will get you the result that you want, but you're getting a result that you don't necessarily want, right? So you want to change the result. The best way to do that is to change one or both of the other two, right? Oftentimes you'll have something like where you'll change on the surface level, superficially, just the action, and the belief stays the same. And it doesn't feel aligned. It doesn't feel authentic. It's not actually what's there, right? Doesn't actually change any lasting change. You're only going to do that action as long as you remember to do the action, right? Or as long as someone reminds you to do the action. But the real work is done when you change the belief. You affect the actual belief, find out what's underlying that belief, where that belief comes from, and really address that. And that's going to change the action automatically anyway, right? And that's going to change the result, right? And it's really interesting, because some of my clients they get really annoyed with me because I get particular about words and the words we use, stuff like again, the word should, for example. I hate that word. I use it sometimes. I catch myself, but I say don't shit on yourself, right? Because should makes you wrong. When you say I should do this or shouldn't have done that, you're making yourself wrong. And I like to think that we do the best we can with any situation. If you knew better and you still did that, then yes, you should have done the other thing, right? But if you didn't know better, if you knew the best you could, and you did the action you thought was right in the moment, then no, you shouldn't have done anything differently. You did the best you could, right? And so those kind of small distinctions we do with people, like we work through them, that therapists do as well, and obviously it's very different. It's a different world, right? But it's parallel, right? There's the parallel things we work on sometimes, and there's parallel approaches that we can adapt. And it's important to take away that stigma, so people are free to actually have those personal conversations and those professional conversations that help them to move forward and keep growing and keep themselves sane, honestly.
So this is what I tell some of my clients who are very empathetic, because they come to me because this person is feeling that way and that person is dumping on them the other way. And I tell them it is not your responsibility. That's what they should tell the person, that it's not their responsibility to be their therapist. If they want to have something fixed in their lives, I mean, having a personal conversation and sharing certain things is one thing. Dumping on another person makes you the enabler, and then there's no incentive for the other person to actually go out and get some assistance with it, because that person in the moment might feel better. Oh, they've just kind of dumped their crap all over you. They walk away, you feel bad, you don't feel the greatest, right? And they walk away temporarily feeling better, and then they do that process again. So there's really no incentive for them to get a little bit deeper. So I'm very sort of strict with my clients when I ask them, like, well, why are you doing it? What inside of you keeps wanting you to be that enabler part? Because you're not helping that person, and you're certainly not being helped in this situation.
Yeah. And that's the question to ask, right? Is like, what, because you can only coach the person in the room, right? So forget the other person for a second. That person that you're talking to, your client or your friend or whatever, what makes them, what belief inside them, like what need inside them, does it satisfy to be that person that gets dumped on all the time, right? Or to feel like they need, what makes them feel like they need to do that? Because a lot of people will do that for themselves. Like, I feel like I have to be there for that person, or I have to be there for that person, or I have to be there for that person. And then when you ask them, when you needed someone, did you reject that person? Well, no, I can't possibly dump all over them. It's like we hold ourselves to these standards that sometimes are just impossible to uphold. And then we hold other people to different standards. And we break our word to ourselves all the time. We don't break our words to other people. And it's just, it's an interesting thing to look into to where that comes from. And it's different for different folks, but the behaviors are very similar and the outcomes are the same, right? But the genesis of where those things come from, that's where we get into and say, okay, where does this belief come from, right? How does it actually impact your life? And what are the results you're getting from this? Are you getting the results that you want to get out of your life right now, given these actions and these beliefs and the way you're operating right now? Are you getting what you want to get out of this? My guess is not, because we're talking, first of all. But secondly, it's like, what's missing right now? What belief what need are you trying to satisfy inside yourself by seeking this kind of thing out? Because sometimes people will seek it out. People won't even try to dump on them. They're like, no, please tell me. I'm here. And they insert themselves in situations they have no business being in, that they don't even need to be in, right? And then they wonder why people keep dumping all over them all the time. And then, like you said, it's an energy transfer. That person walks away temporarily feeling well, but they just transfer the negative energy to you. And now you don't know how to handle that, right? You don't know how to get rid of that, or to convert that energy, or really you never developed the practices or the habits to kind of clear that energy.
Right. And you're not a therapist or a coach or a counselor, so you don't know what to do.
Right. So then you go take it to someone else, and then they get that energy, and then it becomes like an energy loop.
It really does. Part of it is also from an energy healing perspective. We call them energy vampires, because they're coming to you because you're in an upbeat kind of place. And, they've transferred their crap on you, but they've also taken a little bit out of you as a result of it. That's part of their little feeling better, feeling the release part. And then they move on. And I guarantee you, they do it to the next person that will listen to them, and the next person that will listen to them. And just as a little FYI, I didn't realize it, but I used to do that. I used to complain a lot about one of my previous works that I used to do. And finally, my dad's like, you're giving me a headache. Either do something about it or stop talking about it. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't easy to hear. Got me a little upset because I went into my victim story. But in the end, I was like, yeah, that's actually the truth.
So do you know why I laughed when you mentioned energy vampires? Can you guess why I laughed?
No, tell me, why did you laugh?
It's a TV reference, of course. So there's a show called What We Do in the Shadows. It is it's fun. It's a comedy. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
it's about vampires living in today's world, right? But there are 3 vampires and a familiar that they have, and then there's a 4th vampire who's an energy vampire, and that's his whole job. So he works in an office, and he walks around just telling people boring, annoying stories, and he's like, yeah, this is great. I'm getting all their energy. It's phenomenal, and it's hilarious. The way they do the show is very well done. And yeah, so I know you're not going to watch it. Anyone else watching this other than me, check it out. It's actually really, really funny. She's never going to watch it. She's not going to know what I'm talking about. But for those of you who like good TV and entertainment, What We Do in the Shadows by Taika Waititi is hilarious. But it's a great example of an energy vampire. And again, those people don't necessarily actively. The difference is that I will say that the not funny part of it, people who are energy vampires don't always know that they're doing it. Some people do. Some of them know that they're able to to do to act this way and sap other people's energy, and they know they need to do this, right? But it's very few and far between. Typically, people who have this need to get energy from other people, they don't even know it, right? They're not even aware enough that this is what's happening. They don't know that they're sapping their friends and family's energy. They just know that they need to tell someone something and get this off their chest. That's the way they're thinking about it. I need to get it off my chest. But what's really happening is they're passing off negative energy and sapping positive energy, and it's not healthy ultimately.
So I'm just reading Natasha's message. 2 countrymen and women of mine are so freaking amazing.
Thanks,
well,
Tasha.
we should invite Natasha up here and give us a little bit of her insight. But yeah, it's, bringing somebody into a relationship is really a mirror, because we get to see all our imbalances and dysfunctions. Well, we don't get to see it. There's an opportunity to see it.
Yes.
And oftentimes we shut ourselves down. Another thing I will tell you, I've said this, I never expected to get married. I really was terrified about getting married. And for the first several months in my marriage, I couldn't ever say, I'm sorry. The words just didn't come out. It just didn't come out. And it took me a very long time, months and months, to be able to finally say, I'm sorry. And now I'm the first person to say it. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That was my fault. I'm truly sorry for it. But it took a very long time to be able to acknowledge that vulnerability inside of me. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that this was what I was doing. But then in my head, I make up this whole story as to why I am right? And then I respond from that way.
Yep.
And, there are many, I don't advocate marriage, but there are many good ways of self-development. You either self-develop or you self-destruct, I think, in the end.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. Like 100%. We definitely either self-develop or self-destruct. 3 days in. No, but to your point about, and I think that's an important distinction, because again, people don't necessarily, we're not always aware of how we're behaving, right? But then whatever behavior we have, it won't necessarily feel exactly right, but you're going to backwards rationalize, right? You're going to find a rationalization to actually justify your behaviors in a story. We're greater than our stories, but we don't let ourselves be greater than our stories, right? We let our stories rule us as opposed to us writing our stories. I think that's the danger we fall into. Like in your example, for example, Nihi, when you're not apologizing at all, it's something where you can very easily just overcompensate, and now you apologize for everything, even when it's not your fault, right? But it's like when you said that made me think of the concept I do with business coaching, or with like any kind of marketing campaign or offering, or in general things you talk to other people about. But it's like, how can we be wrong, right? Don't assume you're right. Just assume that there's a way you can be wrong, right? And then find that way. If there's not a way you can be wrong, then you're probably right. But if there's a way you can be wrong, you might be wrong, right? And I think people, especially nowadays with all this polarization craziness happening right now, it's people, they come from a place where I know that I'm right no matter what, right? Everyone else is wrong. I'm right. There's no possible way. There's any possible word in my statement that could possibly be a fallacy. When in reality, sometimes the entire statement is a fallacy, and the basis on which it's built is a fallacy. Hey, Louise, sorry to miss you, but thanks for jumping on. So yeah, it's just.
And that is, I liked everything that you said, Drew. I mean, I like most of what you say anyway, but what you just said was really very insightful, because first and foremost, the number one thing to ask yourself is, how am I justifying my position, right? And we try to come up with logical ways and illogical ways, but number one, how am I justifying my position? And you can give an entire list. See, this is all the stuff the other person did or the situation is, and therefore I'm right and you're wrong, type of thing. And then the second part is for us to be able to ask ourselves, is there any possibility, even the tiniest bit of possibility, that maybe this is not 100% always the case? Is it always going to be that this thing happens and therefore bad things happen? People either love the government, hate the government. Not too many people love the government anymore, but everything, oh, government sucks. Everything is terrible about the government. Can't trust the government. Everything is going to be bad about the government. I'm like, you go live in a country where the government is truly dysfunctional, and do you think you would be feeling the same way? So,
well, you go to a country where you can't actually speak up against the government. Then what happens, right?
Exactly.
And they're talking about socialism and this crazy stuff, and they're making this country seem like it's. And don't get me wrong, this country has its problems, obviously, as we've seen, right? But it's still better than a lot of other countries where you can't actually speak up and say anything about this. You can't go on Twitter in China and say, screw this guy or screw that government official. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. It's not allowed. Like, that's
Can
actual.
you imagine North Korea?
Right, North Korea is another example, right? That's actual censorship, right? Some people who throw these words around, they don't actually understand what they mean, right? They don't know what these things actually, what the impact of those words actually are, and it's really, But I'm again, I want to do another TV reference because based on what you said, because it's like everything sucks, right? It's like, oh yeah, this sucks, government sucks, the Verizon sucks, AT&T sucks. The person who said that was actually Ronnie Chang. I referenced him before, but he had that huge thing. Not huge thing. He had a TV show on Netflix, a comedy special, and he's hilarious. He's talking about the just a lot of observations about America and how he.
Yeah. Okay. You have talked about him. I remember that now.
It was.
I remember stories more than names.
Yes, exactly. And I know you're never going to watch it, so not talking to Naheed, talking to everyone else. Watch this on Netflix. It's called Asian Comedian Destroys America. He doesn't actually destroy it. Obviously, he's hilarious. He makes fun of it, but he pokes fun at things that are actually true, right? Like all the polarities and all the hyperbole we use and that kind of stuff. It's really interesting.
So I have a statement to all our viewers, both current and in the future. Anybody who thinks that Drew should do some sort of media type of critique or assessment or summary would be great for me because I'm never going to watch it. Just give him like a thumbs up and say, get on it. It's time to start moving forward with that because clearly he spends a lot of time watching this stuff.
I do. And clearly you spend a lot of time watching my content because I do cinema coach.
Yes, but the point is you don't really talk about it. Do you do it? I thought you said you wanted to do it.
No, I started doing it. I have them on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.
Look, when I shut down, I shut down.
The truth comes out on Chai with Coaches, guys. This is where we spit truth. We're spitting truth at this point.
I never claimed otherwise.
That's true. That's fair enough. You never said you watched it, so that's fine. Fair enough. But I do have those things, and I'm doing more of them. But I love this kind of stuff. I love making connections to that kind of stuff because I think, the average person watches TV a lot more and does
makes
listen
it
to
tangible.
Yeah, it's examples that they can look at, and they don't necessarily put them on the spot and make me feel like, oh, my life sucks. No, it's like on TV. It's someone else's life sucks. Right, or someone else is dealing with this stuff. You're not wrong. Someone else is wrong. So that way it's a little bit light. All
right, so let's bring it back to the coaching question.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Say hypothetically, say that you have a friend or a couple of friends. You're observing that their relationship is kind of taking a left turn. It might be devolving. Maybe there were beginnings of it in the past that most people kind of turn their eyes and they don't really pay attention to. But now you're a close friend and you're beginning to notice that things are really devolving. Kind of a touchy situation, but would you actually reach out and say, hey, how's it going? What's going on with you guys? Are you guys doing okay?
It depends, but generally, yes. If I'm close friends with them, yes, I'll reach out and be like, hey, what's going on? Whichever one I'm closer to, or both of them, if I'm close to both of them, I would say like, hey, just want to check in with you guys, make sure everything's good. Like here, and I'd give an example. I'd be like, I noticed this when we're hanging out. I noticed you guys are on each other all the time. Like you get arguing all the time, or this happened or whatever. I give some reference to where I'm coming from. It's not just out of thin air, but I also say like, listen, are you guys talking to anybody? Are you guys, are you guys open to talking to somebody? Like if you guys are having trouble, like I don't want you just to feel like you're dealing with it by yourself. Feel free to confide in me, but as your friend, I'm not going to coach you as a friend because I don't coach friends and family because they don't listen to you anyway. But aside from that,
and they don't want to pay you either.
Well, aside from those two things, the other thing on the more functional and effective side is it's impossible to. One of the most important things about being a coach is being relatively impartial, right, and somewhat objective. And I say relatively and somewhat because we're human. We're still always going to have some level of bias. But when you're talking to a client, they're a client. They're not your friend, right? You're not personally invested in that person, their life doing whatever you're allowed to, you won't judge them for doing something, right? With a friend or family, it's a lot harder to not judge. It's like, you really gonna do that, dude? Like, are you sure? Like, because last time you did that, you really, like, you let history come back. With a client, you don't do that, right? And so I would refer out, like, hey, listen, I've got a really good friend who I could refer you to. It's just to talk to, have a conversation, see if it makes sense to keep talking with them, if it helps you. If not, no worries. But I don't want you guys to feel like you have no one to talk to, right? I'd probably introduce it somewhere like that. If it's a relationship, if it was a leader or someone in an organization, it'd probably be something similar. I'd probably pull him aside and be like, or her aside and be like, hey, listen, I know what you're doing with this, or it seems like you're dealing with X, Y, and Z. Is it something worth talking about? Like, again, if you want to talk to me first, that's fine, but I'm not partial. I mean, I'm not impartial here, right? I would err inside of you no matter what. So would it help to talk to someone who's impartial, right? And that's an opportunity to refer a friend or some other coach that I know of, or a therapist if it's in a situation that's extreme, depending on the level of severity and that kind of thing, that way.
So as you were talking, I was thinking about a situation that happened to me when I was a little bit out of college. A good friend from college just sort of randomly asked me this question. At least to me, it was random. Maybe it wasn't for her. She said, if I and my husband were having trouble, would you say something? Would you intervene? She didn't say intervene, but, would you come and talk to us or something like that? And my answer was no, I wouldn't, because I didn't think it was my place. And my friend got offended. She said, if something was going on with you, I would reach out. I wouldn't pretend that it wasn't happening. And so I was thinking a little bit deeper, like, why did I decide that? Why did I say what I said? And I remember when I was very young, I was probably a teenager at that time, and I was noticing a family member who was in a kind of relationship pattern, okay? Mm-hmm. And I pointed it out to my family member. And then what happened was, what I thought was going to be a private conversation in front of me was brought up to the partner. And I felt embarrassed. I felt like that other person may have felt a little betrayed.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm never going to put myself in that situation again. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's also where it depends on the other person, right? And what your connection with them, what the relationship with them is, right? If they're a person that is going to be relatively tactful about stuff, like, it's a different conversation versus someone who just has zero situational awareness at all, right? And or just doesn't have that kind of mentality of confidentiality or what it looks like, and I think the other part of it too is there's a cultural part of that too, where it's like asking that question. That's also depends on who the person is and what their mentality is. Mindset's everything, right? And if they're steeped in a culture where there's deep shame about having those kind of issues, they will deny it till they're in their grave, right? And they're like, no, of course not. No, I'm like, dude, you threatened him with a knife. I think there might be some issues. No. That's just Monday morning, like they'll make excuses up the wazoo, right? Because that's just, again, like, culturally, it is what happens.
All of that is true, but I really liked what you said earlier, which is just going up to somebody and saying, hey, look, I noticed you're under something, stress, pressure, what have you. You guys seem to be having some issues. Just to let you know, I'm here if you need me. I like how you phrased, how you said that. Just to let you know, you don't have to deal with this by yourself. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. That's not why I'm coming to you, but just want to know that I'm here for you. And I really like that. And I hope that that some of our listeners, if they are experiencing that and witnessing that, because COVID has brought out a tremendous amount of relationship stress in our lives, right? And if you're witnessing that, to just kind of go up to somebody and say, hey, look, I see you're struggling a little bit. I'm just wanting you to know that I'm here. Not to be the dumping person, right? Just to be clear about that. But if you need somebody to talk to, or if you need a resource, I can help with that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to give them that feedback, sometimes that they're getting, that it's visible, that they're not hiding it as well as they think they are.
Right.
Like, even, I mean, I mentioned that like shame thing, not because it would necessarily stop me, but because there's consideration, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of folks like that. But I mean, I just always I err on the side of feedback. Honestly, I tend to be that person who's like, I'm gonna keep giving you feedback, or I'm gonna ask permission about stuff, and I give them the option, right? I always ask like, hey, would you like to talk to someone, or would you like to talk to me, or whatever, and like, and even whenever possible, even if they're talking to me, I would still be like, listen, this is probably deeper than I need to, I'm comfortable going in your relationship right now, so you should probably talk to somebody else. I have someone I can talk, like, and I'll keep pushing that until they say that they don't want to, right? They actively say that they're not right, they don't want to do that or whatever, because it's just like they have to know that it's okay. There's not going to be judgment associated with that, right?
I will say sometimes, especially depending on the relationship, a little bit of tough love is important. I did that with somebody. I said, look, I know you don't want to hear this, but this situation is never going to go away unless you get professional help, period. I mean, you can come up with every excuse as to why you think it will be better next time, but if you've been dealing with this for the last, decade, it's not.
Yeah. No, and that's what a friend of mine and I had to do with a mutual friend of ours when he was going through a rough time with his marriage, and ultimately they got divorced. But it was I mean, he wasn't going to unless we basically left the space for it to be okay for him to talk about it and open up about it.
Right? And the one more thing that I added in there that I think was really effective, I didn't mean it that way, I said, it's really painful for me to watch this. There's nothing I can do, and I hear you talk about it over and over again.
Yeah, and it's almost like having an intervention with them, right? Like it's not just affecting you, it's affecting everyone in your life, and with this guy, it was like affecting his relationships with his friends, with his siblings, with his parents, and he wasn't aware of these other people. He's like, oh no, it's just me, it's only affecting me, so that's okay. As if that's okay, like as if that's not enough, right? Like, it's only affecting me, it's only causing me to have high blood pressure and diabetes, heart disease, all these things, obesity. That's fine as long as it doesn't affect anyone else.
Right.
Really? Like, so it's funny how much we minimize ourselves sometimes to these things as well.
Yeah, by funny, I know you mean sad.
Yeah. But speaking of minimizing, which is not a good transition at all because it has nothing to do with what I'm going to say. But we're actually at 42 minutes, so we're actually way above what I normally go to. So this is actually a fun conversation, though. I hope folks got something out of it. But feel free to give us feedback, though. Leave a like, comment, and share, and subscribe, and let us know if you have any questions or comments you want us to talk about further. Nahid, anything to add before we jump off?
Yeah, I always like to tell people when you're in a triggered place, take a moment and say, if somebody behaved this way to me, or sorry, let me rephrase that. If someone else was behaving this way, whoever it happens to be, would it be okay? Whether it's me behaving this way or someone else behaving that way to me, put it on an impartial third person. If you witness somebody behaving like that, is it okay? And if the answer is no, and you are having a hard time stopping that behavior pattern, you are doing yourself a disservice by not seeking out further help.
Agreed. Thanks, Tasha. Glad that you can join in. Thanks, everyone. Louise, Tasha, other folks who joined in and watched. But I like that as an ending note as well. I think that's important because it does help to take that step back, right, and make yourself an observer of the situation sometimes. And the other thing I would say is and just along with what we said, just to but there's two ways to act. You're either subject to other things, like going back to what you said earlier about the external factors, or you're talking about things that are. Hey, Andrea, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. And you're either subject to other things, or you're the object of the situation where you're in control of things, right? And one situation you have control, the other one you're giving up all control, right? So which one would you rather be in? Would you rather be the active verb, or rather be the passive verb? And I'm being a complete nerd because I'm talking about language arts right now, but that's okay because that's what I am. But yeah, so think about that's something I think folks could benefit from thinking about that way as well.
Absolutely. So see everybody in 2 weeks.
Yeah, see you guys in 2 weeks. We'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel, and
throw in some suggestions.
Yeah, let us know what you guys want to talk about. Any suggestions?
Otherwise, we'll keep coming up with our own great ideas.
Yes, and Nahid will not watch any more TV. So, give her some suggestions of stuff to watch. So she can at least match some of my references.
I love hearing them all.
All right, guys. Well, listen, take care. Thank you guys for joining us so much. Take care. And again, as always, thanks to Hannah for organizing everything. And yeah, cool. And Tasha, just so you know, the references I made, one was What We Do in the Shadows, which I think is on Amazon Prime or Hulu, one of those two. The other one is Ronnie Chieng, who's a comedian. He's on HBO. He's also on Daily Show, but he's on HBO with the Asian Comedian Destroys America. So check it out. Thanks, guys.